In the small city of Willow Springs, North Carolina, the summer air hung heavy, thick with heat and the low hum of cicadas. On the corner of Maple and 7th, under a faded green awning, 17-year-old Emily Saunders set up her art stand. Her hands were thin, her skin pale, the telltale signs of months spent in hospitals under fluorescent lights. But her eyes, those stayed sharp, burning with a quiet determination that refused to be crushed. Her mother, Claire, helped unfold the rickety table, laying out the carefully wrapped canvases. "You sure you're okay to stay out here this long, baby?" she asked, brushing a strand of dark hair from Emily's face. Emily forced a smile. "I have to, Mum. We can't afford to wait anymore." The doctors had been clear. Another round of chemotherapy could buy her precious time, maybe even remission. But the insurance company had been just as clear. They wouldn't cover it. Claire worked 2 jobs. Her father, Dan, picked up whatever construction shifts he could, but the bills had piled up until they threatened to crush the family whole. So Emily, the girl who had been painting since she could hold a brush, decided to fight the only way she knew how. She would sell her art. The first morning was slow. Shoppers bustled past on their way to the farmer's market. Kids tugged on their parents' hands. Teenagers scrolled through their phones, barely noticing the table stacked with vivid landscapes and soft watercolors. Emily sat on a folding chair, legs tucked under her, heart pounding each time someone slowed, even slightly. By noon, her stomach churned with nausea, not just from hunger or heat, but the creeping edge of her illness, whispering its limits. She gripped the edge of the table, steadying herself. One painting, she told herself. If she could just sell one, maybe it would start something. Maybe word would spread. A woman in a straw hat paused, eyes lingering on a small canvas of a moonlit forest. Emily straightened, trying to keep her voice steady. "Hi, are you interested in that one?" The woman smiled faintly, eyes soft, with pity. "Oh, sweetie, they're lovely. But I don't carry cash." She reached out, lightly touched Emily's hand. "Stay strong, okay?" Emily's throat tightened. She nodded, blinking fast as the woman drifted away. She hated that word, strong. Everyone told her she was strong, but strength didn't pay hospital bills. By late afternoon, Emily's shoulders slumped. Her mother had run home to check on Dan, leaving her alone under the awning. The light shifted, casting long shadows across the pavement. Emily stared at the canvases, willing someone, anyone, to stop. And then someone did. A man in a battered leather jacket, a baseball cap pulled low over silver hair, walked up to the stand. Emily didn't look up right away. She'd seen plenty of browsers, people who flipped through the paintings out of curiosity, then left without a word. But this man wasn't moving on. He stood perfectly still, hands in his jacket pockets, studying the artwork. Slowly, Emily lifted her gaze. "Did you paint these?" the man asked, his voice rough, quiet. Emily nodded. "Yeah." He reached out, picking up a small canvas. A sweeping prairie under a stormy sky. He held it up, tilting it in the fading light. "You've got an eye for the lonely places," he murmured. Emily felt her heart jolt. Not many people noticed that. Not many looked past the surface. She swallowed hard. I like painting the spaces that feel like they're waiting for something." The man's eyes met hers, and for a flicker of a moment, she felt like he saw right through her, down to the bone. He set the painting back down, slow and deliberate. "What are you asking for this one?" Her voice came out small. $200. The man gave a soft chuckle, shaking his head. "That's too low, kid." Emily's stomach sank. "I can't lower it. I really—" He held up a hand. "No, I mean, it's worth more." She stared, heart pounding. I don't—" The man reached into his pocket, pulling out something she hadn't seen in a long time. A checkbook. He uncapped a pen, scribbled something, tore the slip free and handed it to her. Emily took it with trembling fingers. When she saw the number, her knees nearly gave out. $50,000. Her breath caught in her chest. This isn't
Real? The man tipped his head slightly, finally lifting the brim of his cap. For a heartbeat, Emily forgot how to breathe.
Clint Eastwood. The Clint Eastwood. Without a word, he gave her a small, knowing nod, then turned, hands tucked in his pockets, walking off down the sidewalk. Emily clutched the check, her world tilting under her feet, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst. This was it. This was the moment that would change everything. And the craziest part? This was just the beginning. Emily stood frozen, the edges of the world blurring, the check trembling in her hands. She couldn't hear the cars anymore, couldn't feel the heat pressing down on her skin. All she could see was the number $50,000 written in neat, confident handwriting. Her fingers tightened around the paper as if it might vanish. She blinked hard, trying to clear the haze from her eyes. Clint Eastwood. The Clint Eastwood. Her father, Dan, always called him the man with the unbreakable stare. She remembered watching old movies with him when she was a little girl. Westerns, cop dramas, stories about grit and survival. And now here he was, walking away down a small-town sidewalk, leaving her holding something that could save her life. Emily's pulse thundered in her ears as she reached for her phone, fingers shaking too hard to unlock it. She needed to call her mom, her dad, someone, anyone, to tell them what had just happened. Before she could, the first person noticed. A teenage boy, earbuds dangling around his neck, slowed mid-step, his eyes darting between Emily and this retreating figure of Clint Eastwood, his mouth opened slightly, his hand pointing as if he couldn't quite trust his own eyes. Wait, is that? Another person stopped. A woman pushing a stroller turned her head, brow furrowing. A man carrying grocery bags paused, adjusting his sunglasses, his gaze flicking toward the art stand. And then the whispers started. That's Clint Eastwood. No way. Here? Is he buying something? What's going on? Emily's stomach lurched. She had always been invisible on this street corner. Suddenly she was the center of a storm. A group of college students rushed over, phones already raised, capturing video. A woman in business heels backtracked, pulling out her phone and snapping photos. The man with the grocery bag stepped closer, his voice incredulous. Did he just buy something? Emily's cheeks flushed. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. And then the most surreal thing happened. A woman approached the table, eyes wide, glancing between the paintings and the check still clutched in Emily's hands. How much for this one? She asked, fingers hovering over a canvas of a mountain lake. Emily swallowed. $180. I'll take it. Before she could even process the sale, another voice cut in. I want one too. Do you take credit?
Cards. A young couple leaned over the table, their hands hovering eagerly. A teenage girl tugged on her dad's arm. Dad, I need cash. Please, I want to buy one before they're gone.
It was like a dam breaking. Emily's little art stand, which for days had been ignored by the crowd, was now swarmed. People didn't haggle, didn't hesitate. They handed over cash, credit cards, PayPal transfers. One man bought 2 paintings at once. Another asked if she took custom orders. Someone offered to pay extra just to hold a piece for later. Emily's head spun. She barely had time to pack paintings into paper bags, her hands shaking with every sale. And Clint Eastwood? He watched from the edge of the crowd, arms crossed, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Finally, with a small nod, he tipped his hat to her, just once, and walked away, disappearing into the city like a ghost from a movie. Emily stared after him, breathless. Her life had changed in a matter of minutes. By nightfall, when she and her parents counted the cash and checked the new online orders pouring in, It was clear she had raised enough not just for one round of chemo, but for the entire treatment, every hospital bill, every medication, every crushing debt. Gone. Claire sat on the couch, holding her daughter's hands in her own, tears slipping silently down her face. Dan paced the living room, running both hands through his graying hair, shaking his head in disbelief.
I don't understand how this happened, he murmured. I mean, Clint Eastwood? Here? Emily let out a soft laugh, tears streaming down her cheeks. I don't know, Dad. I don't know, but I think I get another shot now. She
glanced over at her easel in the corner of the room, the half-finished painting waiting quietly. For the first time in a long time, she felt a spark inside her. Not just the desperate fight for survival, but something else. Hope. She wasn't just selling paintings anymore. She was stepping into a life she had only ever dreamed of. And the craziest part? This was still just the beginning. By the next morning, Emily's life was no longer hers alone. She woke up to the constant buzz of her phone vibrating on the nightstand. Dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of notifications. Her inbox was overflowing. Her social media accounts, barely used before, were flooded with messages. She sat up slowly, her body still aching from the long day before, chemo's exhaustion clinging to her bones. With a shaking hand, she unlocked the screen. Clint Eastwood buys teen artists painting for $50,000. Young cancer fighter's art stand goes viral overnight. Hollywood legend helps save teen's life with one stunning gesture. Her face was everywhere, her shy smile. Behind the art table, her trembling hands holding the check, Clint Eastwood beside her, looking every bit the living legend. Someone had filmed the moment, and now it had millions of views. Emily's breath hitched. She scrolled through the flood
of messages. Hi, Emily. Your story touched my heart. I want to commission a piece for my wife. Do you ship to California? I'd love to buy something. I'm a cancer survivor too. Your strength gives me hope. Please let me support you. Her hands pressed to her mouth as tears welled in her eyes. It was too much, too fast, too unreal. Downstairs, her mother's voice floated up the stairs. Emily, sweetheart, come down here. The phone's ringing off the hook. Emily stumbled out of bed, feet bare on the carpet, heart thudding in her chest. She made her way to
the living room, where her father stood holding the house phone, blinking at the screen like it might explode. It's someone from New York, Dan murmured, handing the phone over. From an art gallery. Emily's hands trembled as she lifted the receiver. Hello, Emily Saunders. A woman's warm voice crackled through the line. My name is Margaret Lane. I'm the director of the Willow and Grove Gallery in Manhattan. I saw your story, everyone has, and I'd love to speak with you about showcasing your work. Emily's knees buckled slightly and she dropped into the nearest chair. Showcasing? My work, she repeated softly. Yes, Margaret laughed gently. Your story has captured the nation, Emily, but more importantly, your art has heart. We want to give you a platform, not as a charity case, but as a real, working artist. Emily pressed a hand to her chest, feeling her heart slam against her ribs. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Margaret replied. We can fly you up here. You'll have a proper gallery showing. Buyers, press, everything. It's your time, Emily. The call ended, but Emily sat frozen long after, staring at the silent receiver. She wasn't just fighting for her life anymore. She was stepping into a world she had only dreamed about, and it was welcoming her with open arms. That night, she stood alone in her room, staring at her easel. The painting, sitting there, was unfinished, a stormy seascape, waves crashing against jagged rocks. She picked up her brush slowly, turning it in her fingers. For the first time in months, the act of painting wasn't about desperation. It wasn't about scraping together money or clinging to survival. It was about expression. about reclaiming, something the illness had almost stolen from her. As the brush touched the canvas, Emily felt something loosen inside her.
Not all the fear that would never fully go away, but enough to take one more step forward. Downstairs, her parents watched the evening news. The anchor smiled into the camera. In other news tonight, a local teen's fight against
Cancer has inspired an outpouring of support after a chance encounter with Hollywood icon Clint Eastwood. The story has sparked a national wave of art sales, commissions, and donations, proving once again that sometimes the right moment and the right gesture can change everything. Emily sat back, staring at the canvas in front of her. This wasn't the end of her story. It was the start of something bigger. 2 weeks later, Emily stood on the tarmac of the tiny Willow Springs airport, clutching her carry-on bag, heart pounding in her chest. She had never flown before. She had never even left North Carolina. But now here she was, boarding a plane to New York City, her parents beside her, all three wide-eyed and stunned. The Willow and Grove Gallery had arranged everything: the tickets, the hotel, the transportation. Margaret Lane had called nearly every day, walking Emily through the details of the show. They wanted a full collection. They wanted press interviews. They wanted to introduce her to major collectors. Emily had painted almost non-stop since the Clint Eastwood moment, her energy fueled not by fear, but by a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in months. She worked through the nights, filling the small studio space in the corner of their living room with new canvases. She painted cityscapes, wild landscapes, abstract emotions. Everything inside her poured onto those surfaces. And now she was about to walk into the art world like a storm. The flight was short, but surreal. Emily pressed her face to the window, watching the patchwork fields and small towns fall away beneath her, replaced by the glimmer of skyscrapers and highways as the plane dipped toward New York. Her mother squeezed her hand, eyes shimmering. "You're amazing, baby," she whispered. "You've always been amazing." Emily smiled softly, her heart squeezing tight in her chest. The gallery was everything she imagined and more. High white walls, shining floors, spotlights casting warm pools of light onto each piece. Margaret Lane met them at the entrance, a tall woman with silver hair and sharp eyes that softened when she looked at Emily. "You've created magic," Margaret said quietly as they walked through the gallery space. "We've already had calls from collectors. There's going to be a line out the door tonight." Emily's stomach fluttered. She had thought the Clint Eastwood moment was the peak, but this, standing here, seeing her paintings lined up in a professional space, felt like stepping into an entirely new life. That evening, as the doors opened, people flooded in. Critics, collectors, reporters, even celebrities. Cameras flashed, voices murmured. Hands reached for glasses of champagne as they wandered through the exhibit, pausing, pointing, talking, really seeing. And through it all, Emily stood quietly at the edge, soaking it in. It wasn't just the money anymore. It wasn't just survival. It was recognition. It was the world finally seeing her not as a patient, not as a tragic story, but as an artist. Margaret slipped to her side halfway through the night, her voice low in Emily's ear. "I have a surprise for you." Emily turned, her brow furrowing slightly, and then she saw him. Clint Eastwood. He had come. The crowd parted slightly as he approached, dressed in a simple black blazer, the same quiet strength in his walk that had stunned her weeks before. The room's chatter softened, people noticing, heads turning. Emily felt her chest tighten, her hands trembling at her sides. He smiled faintly as he reached her, his blue eyes sharp and steady. "Told you, kid," he murmured. "Just keep painting." Emily's voice cracked as she whispered back, "Thank you for everything." He shook his head. "You did this. I just saw what was already there." They stood there for a moment, Two fighters in different arenas, sharing an unspoken respect. The flash of cameras, the excited murmurs, the flood of questions from reporters. Emily barely heard any of it. She was locked in that moment, the world falling away around her. For the first time since her diagnosis, she felt fully alive, not sick, not desperate, not small, alive, and she knew deep in her bones that this was only the beginning of what she was meant to do. By the time Emily returned home to Willow Springs, the world had already shifted beneath her feet. The gallery show was a massive success. Half the collection had sold on opening night, and the rest within days. Articles poured in from national newspapers, art magazines, television interviews, all telling the story of the small-town girl who had captured America's heart with her paintings and her fight. But more than fame, what Emily carried home was something quieter, deeper. She had walked into that New York gallery terrified she would be seen as a charity case, a girl fighting cancer, saved by a celebrity. But that wasn't what happened. People had come for her art. They wanted her work, her vision, her talent. They saw her as an artist. Back in her small bedroom, Emily sat cross-legged on the floor, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of tea. She stared at the walls, where the empty hooks waited for her new paintings. She wasn't sure where to begin. Her body was still weak, recovering from months of chemo, but something stronger had taken root inside her, a stubborn, growing fire. She knew she couldn't waste the chance she'd been given. Late at night, when the house was silent, Emily sat by the window with a sketchbook, drawing by moonlight. She let the pencil glide across the page, not thinking, just feeling. Images poured out, quiet streets, hands reaching for each other, figures standing alone in vast open spaces. Each stroke was a promise to herself. This was not a one-time story. This was her life now. And then, just as she was beginning to settle back into her routine, the next call came. Her mother knocked on the door softly. "Emily, it's for you." Emily blinked, rising slowly. She padded barefoot to the kitchen, heart skipping when she saw the name on the caller ID, California Arts Foundation. She picked up the phone, her voice shaky. "Hello?" A warm, excited voice answered. "Emily Saunders? This is Rachel Moore from the California Arts Foundation. We'd love to invite you to speak at our upcoming event. Share your story, your journey. We're hosting an event for
young artists and cancer survivors, and you're an inspiration to so many." Emily's chest tightened. She pressed a hand to her heart. "Me? Speak? Yes, you." Rachel laughed gently. "You're not just an artist anymore, Emily. You're a voice."
The conversation ended, and Emily stood there, staring at the silent phone, her breath catching in her throat. She thought back to the long days on the sidewalk, selling paintings under the sweltering sun, the hours when no one stopped, the times she had wondered if anyone would ever see her. Now people weren't just seeing her, they were listening, and behind every invitation, every headline, every commission, she knew there was one quiet figure who had tipped the first domino. Clint Eastwood. He had seen something in her when she was at her most invisible, and that one moment, that one act of belief, had rippled outward until it changed everything. Emily felt her throat tighten, her eyes stinging with unshed tears. She didn't know where the road would take her next. She didn't know how long she would have, or what challenges lay ahead. But she knew one thing for certain. She would keep painting. She would keep telling her story, and she would never forget the man in the cowboy hat who gave her the chance to do both. A month later, Emily stood on a stage she never imagined she'd reach. The California Arts Foundation event buzzed with energy. Young artists, cancer survivors, families, journalists, and supporters filled the elegant auditorium. Bright spotlights illuminated the stage, where Emily clutched the microphone in both hands, her palms slightly damp, her heart thudding hard in her chest. She took a shaky breath, glancing out at the sea of faces. Her parents sat in the front.
Row! Her mother's hands clasped tightly, her father's eyes shining with quiet pride.
Behind them were people from across the country, some who had bought her paintings, some who had just come to hear the girl who had stunned the art world. Emily cleared her throat, her voice trembling, but sure. "I never thought I'd be standing here," she began softly. "A few months ago I was just a girl on a sidewalk, selling paintings because I was desperate to stay alive. I thought maybe, if I was lucky, I'd make a few $100s. Enough for one more round of treatment. Enough to buy some time." She paused, swallowing back the lump rising in her throat. But then someone stopped. Someone saw me when I felt invisible. And with one act, one choice, he gave me more than just money. He gave me back my fight. The room was completely silent, the weight of her words sinking into the crowd. "I don't know how long any of us have," Emily continued, her voice steadying, her gaze sweeping the room. "But I know that as long as I'm here, I'll keep making art. I'll keep telling stories, because sometimes the right story at the right moment can change a life." A quiet ripple of applause began, then swelled into a standing ovation. Emily pressed a hand to her chest, tears brimming in her eyes as she smiled through the flood of emotion. After the event, people lined up to meet her. Young artists with sketchbooks clutched tightly, parents of children fighting their own battles, even fellow survivors who just wanted to shake her hand. Late into the night, as the event wound down, a quiet voice spoke from behind her. "Kid," she turned. Clint Eastwood stood there, the same leather jacket, the same faint, knowing smirk. His eyes crinkled slightly at the corners. "You've come a long way," he murmured. Emily swallowed hard, her hands trembling slightly as she reached
Out. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "You saved me." He shook his head. "No," he said quietly. "You saved yourself." He tipped his head slightly, that familiar, unshakable strength shining in his gaze. "But I'm
"Glad I got to watch you do it." For a long moment neither of them spoke. Then, with a small nod, Clint gave her one last smile, a rare, genuine one, before stepping back into the shadows, slipping away as quietly as he'd arrived. Emily stood there, heart pounding, watching him disappear into the night. She turned slowly, looking out over the city lights, feeling the cool air on her face. Her life had been cracked open, rebuilt not just by luck or fame, but by grit, by courage, by the fierce refusal to give up. And as long as she could hold a brush, as long as her hands could create, she would keep going, because Emily Saunders was no longer just fighting to survive. She was here to live, and this was only the beginning.